Going beyond. 2 words that can invoke a multitude of questions, but I only have one for you today. Do you, on a daily basis, go beyond your field of expertise, or as students, your spécialité? Most people nowadays, especially adults, would answer no, or to a certain extent. However, when talking to them, it becomes clear quite quickly that that extent isn't quite as big as we would want it to be. You may have had a similar reflection while choosing your spécialité. While some students like to finally cross out a few subjects, a lot feel regretful towards having to choose only 3 subjects and end up with only 2. It is sad, but it is our reality. People choose a field, stick to it, and engage in very little activities outside of it. And this is where we all fail to go beyond. Society expects this radical choice of field early on in our lives, with the infamous question, what do you want to be when you grow up? That a lot of children fear, especially when they realize they are expected to choose only one aspect of what they are or want to be. What makes the problem more complicated is that it is not pushed forward by will, but by necessity. We possess such an astronomical amount of information that it has become impossible for a single person to learn it all, which forces us to make such limiting choices early on in our lives. This is a cradle of hyper-specialization, a problem in modern society that is paradoxically, as we will see later, both necessary and holding us from further progress. Let's first dive into societies back when we didn't have a problem. Antiquity, especially ancient Greece, was the antithesis of our hyper-specialized societal model. Their thinkers were versatile and almost always skilled in physics, philosophy, mathematics, and multiple forms of art. This allowed them to have a broader view of each problem they tackled, and to think beyond, without limits. Pythagoras is one of the most concrete and well-known examples here, as one of his works, for example, connected mathematics and music theory, while he was also very skilled in physics and philosophy. Numerous others would be worth mentioning, like Aristotle, Plato, Archimedes, etc., but their work is too complex to fully dive in today. Even later, when the antique way of thinking was being rediscovered with movements like humanism, great thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci had the same versatility. Anyhow, in modern times, a multitude of successful people, especially people working in STEM fields, have brought up having to quit a creative hobby when pursuing their careers, no matter how talented or serious they were about it. This study from 2021 of PLOS ONE, for example, declares that up to 50% of children, depending on gender, that were engaged in musical activities stopped by the age of 17. While this study is not specifically about children who pursued a scientific career afterwards, this gives an idea of the rate at which creative activities are being abandoned by multi-talented children, especially those with an interest in one or multiple scientific fields alongside an artistic one. This makes sense, since art and science are nowadays thought to be polar opposites. It's quite tragic when we understand that both are actually closely related to each other. The reason they seem so far apart is because art is often about seeing the world subjectively, whereas science is the study of seeing it in the most objective manner possible. But what people often overlook is that both are about seeing the world. Both are the pillars of human progress and have the same purpose, only in different ways. Therefore, separating them does not make sense. Another theory supporting this involves that art began to resemble gods, to create like them, whereas science originated from a desire to understand the world. But how can you create on a world that you don't understand? And on the other side, why would you want to understand a world that you cannot shape? Of course, science can today shape our world, but its original purpose came from a place of observation. This theory was especially present again in ancient Greece. Aristotle, for instance, defended the idea that artists created what nature or the divine, depending on the translation, left undone, whereas science was for him the object of our inquiry. As a matter of fact, the ancient Greek definition of art and science was extremely different from the one we have today, and a discipline could very well be considered both. The words techne and episteme are the ones closest to what we see as arts and sciences, but our definitions differ. The difference between the ancient Greek words is more similar to what we consider the difference between practice and theory to be, between knowing how and knowing what or why. Therefore, astronomy, for example, was both an art and a science to them, as it was both practical and theoretical, and uncovers the truth about both how and why. Later on, European thinkers considered the 7 so-called free arts to be music, astronomy, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, and grammar, which again differs a lot from the modern perspective that would probably have only categorized music as an art. Sadly, however beautiful antiquity was, its structure can naturally not be reproduced nowadays anymore. As mentioned before, we are too hyper-specialized and possess too much information for us to have such versatile thinkers as those of antiquity. A human brain is, for example, believed to be able to hold around 2.5 million gigabytes of data, while Google processes 1,000 times more, so 2.5 exabytes or 2.5 billion gigabytes every day. The possession of such a quantity of knowledge has turned into both our goal and our wall. Humanity has reached a stage where we have too much information for an individual to possess, but we're putting individuals in boxes of information makes them miss the one that's outside of these boxes, therefore drastically reducing the process of research of further information, as a solution to a problem does not always lie within their own small box. My take on this is that hyper-specialization is thought about in a way to individual way, and if the solution to a problem does not lie in individuality, then it must lie in collectivity. And it does, for the solution I thought about lies in collaborations. If a single person cannot be an artist and a scientist at once anymore, then we can make an artist and a scientist collaborate. This may seem undoable due to the barrier that has separated both fields for such a long time, but I believe it is, while radical and slow, a possible shift in our mindset. It is, in fact, already being done at way smaller scales. An example could be scientific documentaries that mix science with film production, but these projects are often more about the scientific concepts than the work of the artists, or the mix of art and science. Luckily, projects that were especially done for the goal of bridging art and science do exist, notably in education, with a few colleges already proposing specific dual programs or projects. The biggest example of a project I have found to do so is a GSO, the Global Science Opera. This project began as a collaboration between several international educational institutions, like the Galileo Teacher Training Program or Storj University in Norway. Their goal is to invite teams from 30 different countries to come together and develop a scene for the opera by using cinematography, photography, music, and digital art to explain science. More projects like these will not only be mind-opening for the collaborators, but also, and most importantly, for the audience. They would bring diverse communities together and encourage them to explore and go beyond together. I am especially thinking about a lot of artistically talented children that struggle with STEM subjects at school, for which the bringing of art in these subjects would help them have more interest in them and understand them better. Another thing about stopping the separation in schools is that the bringing of art on a more equal footing to science would make children way more resourceful and make them develop multiple ways of thinking rather than just one. Multiple studies show that education in the arts improves critical thinking, like one from the Journal of Advanced Research in Education showing its benefits on children's minds. According to them, children who receive musical education have better verbal skills, literacy, memory, and attention span. Lastly, I strongly believe that bringing art and science together would help with gender equality. STEM fields are widely recognized to be more male-dominated, and in many environments a place where misogyny still thrives, which contributes to the pulling apart of both disciplines. Bringing them together would, in my opinion, drastically reduce the gender war and make scientific fields a much more welcoming place for women. I am aware that my idea is very hard to put in place and involves a complete shift in our collective mindset, but I also know hyper-specialization is hindering humanity, young geniuses, and overall progress. This speech is mainly a first presentation of my idea that I will keep advocating for in the future years, but also a first call for help from the audience to start changing now. Even the smallest changes, like simply adding more arts in a physics presentation, add up, as the biggest change to be done is in our collective mindset. So I hope this speech has made you want to stop keeping science and art apart for a more united and open-minded world.